जाकी नाम त्याये बिन नावे पूज न होए बिन नावे पूज न होए।
गुरु वाहे गुरु गुरु प्यारी साध संगत जी प्यारे बच्चों, हाथ जोड़ो, hold your hands together please, sitting up straight. So, वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह बुलाओ जी। वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह। Welcome to another exciting and not entertaining but information-filled Sunday Youth and Family Club. My wires are a little short, but that's okay. Welcome. Thank you for coming. As you all can read and see on these slides, we have today, we're going to be talking about Remeberance Day. Specifically focusing on the 6 who fought in both World Wars. And you can see that the screen's got poppies all over it, which is a really big symbol of Remembrance Day. And you guys are no strangers to this. In schools all across Canada, from coast to coast, everybody had the Remembrance Day assembly in their schools. So you guys already have some background information about this. So let me start. We have a lot to cover today. And we have like 6 birthdays, so we want to be really quick. You will notice that a lot of my slides have questions. You don't raise your hand. I will be asking questions at the end of the presentation. Summary questions. Let's get started. Remembrance Day, 6 who fought in both World Wars. So boys and girls, some quick review for all of you. This day of remembrance is known as, there's actually 3 very distinct names that we use for this day. The most popular one, of course, is Remembrance Day. Everybody's familiar with that. Another name for this, common name, is Poppy Day, because everybody wears a poppy, and we're going to get to what that actually means. And the third one you might not have heard of yet. Armistice Day. Yes, I'm going to tell you what that means as well. These are the 3 common names for remembrance, for remembering those who have passed away while fighting for our freedom. You want to remember all this and pay super attention, because this is where all the questions will be coming from. Okay, why do we have Remembrance Day? First of all, it helps us remember what happened during the World Wars. And we never ever want to forget our history, boys and girls, because we all know, because we just finished celebrating the Shidi Smagam. If we forget our history, that means we forget the lessons that we should be learning from history. The mistakes, the good, and the bad. So it helps us remember what happened in the past, so we can make sure it never happens again. Another reason we have Remembrance Day is to remember the brave soldiers who fought and died for our freedom. See, you guys really don't realize this, and I'm with you. The horrible tragedy of war, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people died, and that is why we enjoy this beautiful country, Canada, today. We have free education, we have free medical, we can walk freely, we can speak, we can practice our religion. It's all because of those people who died for our freedom. How in the world can we forget them? We can't. And it's also a special day for us to remember and honor those members of the armed forces who are currently, right now as we speak, far off in other countries, still trying to uphold peace and justice. So we remember the past, we remember the present soldiers as well. Now, this word, armistice, what does it mean? It's basically, in the most simple language, it's when the war ended. See, you can't have a war by yourself. The war is between 2 parties, and when both parties, or both countries who are fighting each other, when they agree that we're not going to fight anymore, that is what that's called. It's like a ceasefire. They both agree to stop fighting. That is what that means. So I want you to know, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, this is when all the countries agreed to stop fighting. And that is why we have Remembrance Day on November the 11th. 11th day, 11th month. And that paper, that was signed on the 11th hour. And so we have 11, 11, 11, November the 11th. is no accident. That is when they agreed, stop the war. And that's why we call it Armistice Day. Okay, why do we wear poppies? Poppies, did you know that poppies actually grew where the soldiers' graves were in France? So we have these soldiers who died bravely on the battlefield while fighting the enemy, and they were buried, and all around their graves in France, these beautiful flowers started to grow. Poppies. We wear poppies that show respect for those who die. So when you wear a poppy, you're showing that you care, that you remember, and that you respect them. And here's students, just like you guys wore them on Friday perhaps, or throughout the week. According to our religion, now a poppy is it's not gurbani and it's not a gurkha, but I'll tell you one thing. Because of what the poppy represents, if you ever see one just lying in the hallway, on the ground, you should pick it up right away and put it somewhere where it's not going to be stepped on. Because the poppy represents so much, all those brave soldiers who died. And when we find them on the ground and we step on them, in the Radha, it's disrespect. So always note that. Why else do we wear poppies? Well, buying poppies helps raise money for charities. And there's hundreds and hundreds of these volunteers who you'll see standing. Maybe you saw them in front of a grocery store or a supermarket or at the mall, and they're selling poppies. I want you to know, I don't want you to think, oh, look at this person, they're selling poppies, what a good business, they're making money. These people are volunteers. They're giving up their free time for a really good cause, and all the money that they get helps charities. Now, what happens during Remembrance Day? Perhaps you guys have taken part in some of these things. First of all, first and foremost, we spend time remembering the soldiers who died in World War I. And I've got so many pictures for you. As you listen to me talk, you can look at the pictures as well. Why else? We also think about the soldiers who are currently stationed around the world in war zones. So there's our Canadian troops with the flag. Canada is very, very popular in the world because we're peacekeepers for the most part. When there's problems in the world, we go in there, we try to help keep the peace. We're not known as bullies. There are some countries who are bullies in the world right now. I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to start any problems. But I know Canada is known as a very peaceful, peacekeeping type of nation. We're really proud of that. Of course, we have school-wide assemblies. Here's a student reading a poem, perhaps. And you guys all did that in your schools. I hope you did. And of course, we have special ceremonies every single year across the entire nation where people get together and they say, we cannot forget all of those brave soldiers who died. Okay, why do we observe a moment of silence? Okay, first of all, let's do a show of hands here. If you participated in a school-wide Remembrance Day assembly, please put your hand up nice and high. Okay, hands down. During that assembly, did you observe a moment of silence? That's when everybody was quiet. If you did, put your hand up, please. Excellent, hands down. Let me tell you why we do this, just in case you're wondering. First of all, contemplation. That gives you that 1 or 2 minutes to stop and to think about everything. Think about what Remembrance Day really means, a deep, deep thought. Now, boys and girls, you know, in gymnasiums and in schools, very, very noisy and busy, but the Remembrance Day Assembly, especially our 2 minutes of silence or 1 minute, gives you that 1 minute by yourself amongst everybody else to quietly think. Think about what happened in the past. Prayer. I know a lot of kids, they talk to me, they're like, Biji, when we have the 2 minutes of silence, I put my head down and I do Mool Mantra the Path. That's excellent. You're praying for those who gave up their lives. You're praying for peace. You're praying for Remembrance Day. So prayer, awesome. It's a perfect time to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. If somebody says, what were you thinking of when you had your eyes closed? What were you doing? Well, everybody was standing there observing a moment of silence. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I was praying for those soldiers. I was praying for a better world. I was praying for peace and harmony because that's what Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj taught us. Reflection. Stop and reflect and think about our history and what Remembrance Day means. And of course, a little something close to home. A moment of silence is also meditation. And we all know that Simran kar diya. The best time to always do Simran is in the morning when it's quiet, when it's peaceful, when everything else is asleep. So that moment of silence in the gym, when I was there in my gymnasium and they had the moment of silence, I put my head down and I closed my eyes. Everything was still, and that reminded me of Amrit Vela. And I did Wagyu. That's the way I remember those soldiers. And we're going to do that today as well. Okay, let's focus on our ancestors, those brave Sikhs who fought in both world wars. Every single slide is going to have a different picture on it. And here they are. These are people that you don't know. You might not know them by name, but they are your ancestors. This is our history, and it's quite incredible. Sikh soldiers fought and laid down their lives in World War I. And there's a whole regiment of them walking down. And I do want you to keep noting that every single soldier, or most of them, has on their head a turban, a dastar, they have a buck on their heads. And the reason I mention this is because in both world wars, Sikhs were allowed to wear their turbans during battle. It wasn't even a question. When they said, I would like to sign up to fight in the war, they were told, welcome, this is excellent. We need brave Sikh soldiers. And not even once did somebody say, oops, you're going to have to take your turban off. Nobody ever said that. And hundreds of Gursikhs laid down their lives. Why do I mention that? Because in today's world, countries like France have made it really difficult for Sikhs to wear their turbans. For example, if you live in France and you go to get your driver's license picture, they will tell you, take your turban off. Otherwise, you're not allowed to get a license. We will not take your picture. You can drive around without a license. You can't even drive. And you know how many Gursikhs said, you know what? This is my religion. This is a gift given to be my guru. This is my identity. How can I take it off? And one of the most important things that they say is, you know, when we went to France during the World War and we fought, the Gursikhs fought for France. You can go to France today and see all in the graveyard, all the different tombstones that have the names of the Gursikhs on it. And they say, you know, it wasn't a problem then when we fought for your freedom. And all these years later now, you want us to take our turbans off. How shameful is that? It's also illegal now in public schools for you to wear anything religious. Garda, garban, or pag in France. And we all know what's going on with Quebec now. How they would like anybody, they're trying to pass a law in Quebec right now that says if you are a public servant, that means you work for the government, you should not be allowed to wear any article of faith, whether that be a cross, if you're a Christian, or the star, or a garda. That's what Quebec is trying to pass right now. And how ridiculous is that? I want you guys to know this. Just keep noting all of the soldiers that have fought with their turbans, and all of a sudden, they're told not to wear them. Ridiculous. Did you know when the Gursikhs jumped onto those ships and they sailed off to a different country? They were defending lands that they didn't even know. You know, when you fight a war with somebody, you know what you're fighting for. The Gursikhs knew they were fighting for freedom, they were fighting for justice, they were fighting against the bad guys. But you know what? They didn't even know that some of them didn't even know the lands they were in. But they fought so bravely. They fought against an enemy that was no threat to their own homeland, but someone else's. What does that mean? That means that India was not under direct threat. But the Gursikhs left India, the soldiers, Indian troops left India, went to a different land to fight for somebody else's freedom. How amazing is that? And they fought on the same side as Britain, who had conquered and occupied India for centuries. Let me say that to you very simply. Did you know the British conquered India, they took over India for 300 years, especially northern India, Punjab, Jitwapayan. Your Punjab was taken over by the British for 100 years. And still after that, the Gursikhs went to war and they stood right beside the British and fought alongside the British. How gracious is that? It's a Gursikh hi kar sakda. Because if somebody conquers our land and takes over us for 100 years, you know, with the way we think, we'd be like, I'm never going to like you again, I'm never going to work with you again, you took over my country. But those Gursikhs, they said, doesn't matter who you are, we're going to fight for the truth, and they stood alongside and died alongside British soldiers. How amazing is that? It just shows you the greatest thing is truth and justice. And if there's anybody in your life that you have any hatred or dislike towards, you need to get rid of that quick, if you're the Sikh of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Get this, over 500,000 Indian troops joined the war effort. Give it to you. That's like 500,000, over 500,000 Indian troops joined. And they weren't even under attack. Some important numbers for you to remember. 20% of the Indian army were Sikhs, even though Sikhs only made up 2% of India's population. But they right? Sikhs only make up 2% of India's entire population, and yet 20% of the Indian army was made up of Sikhs. 22 military crosses were awarded for bravery to Indian soldiers while they were fighting. 22. Out of those, 14 went to Sikh soldiers. This is the highest honor you can get for fighting in a war. Here's a picture of Amrit Singh. He was a World War I fighter pilot. Yes, Gursikhs have their own planes. I've got so many videos to show you, but not today because we're going to run out of time, but you can research on your own video. This guy was amazing. He even had his name on his plane. It said Amrit Singh on it. Okay, let's talk about the death toll. I said hundreds. I made a mistake. 74,187 Indian troops were killed in World War I. You know how many kids we had sitting here today? Forget the totals. Close to 200. I'm just going to assume. Every Sunday we get about 200 to 250 students. This is look how packed this area is, right? If you add the parents, we probably have about, 500 people sitting here? 74,000 troops killed in World War I. Wasn't even their war. How about injuries? 69,214 Indian troops were wounded. And here's a newspaper article. Injured Sikh soldier in France, October 1914. Fought in France, injured in France, died for France, and France is saying, you can't wear your pag now. Here's a wartime letter from a Gursikh, the year 1915. I'll read for you. The Sikhs, this is a Gursikh now writing a letter, sending it back to India. He says, the Sikhs did not turn even their noses. They were keen for the fight, and where one man fell, another from behind stood in his place. Until now, God has preserved us, but there is no hope of any one of us returning to India. Here's a Sikh memorial in Belgium. There's actually Sikh memorials in many, many places in Europe. And if you can see in that picture, it says, Ik Omkar Satguru Prasad Sri Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Isn't that crazy? Like, that's awesome. Okay, here's another letter, written in 1916 by a Gursikh. You're staring at the TCD in front of me. Can you pay attention? Okay, here's another Gursikh. He says, we are now fighting in the trenches and are fighting with great courage. We have now come to understand what this war is. We shall experience very many grave difficulties here, but shall surmount them all and return victorious, even if it takes us 100 years to succeed. That's how brave these Gursikhs were. I have to tell you something here. Did you know that the British Army really, really badly wanted Gursikhs to join? And you're not going to believe this, but this is a fact, that when somebody from India, a Sikh, would come to the British Army to join, the first question the British Army would ask them is this: Tera Amrit Shakya hoya ke nahi? That is the question the army would ask. British. They said, are you a Sikh? Did you take the Amrit? Are you baptized? Did you Amrit Shakya hoya? Now you're wondering, why would the British Army care if somebody is baptized or not? But guess what? The British, look, they ruled over India, Punjab for 100 years. They knew exactly what the Amrit meant. They knew exactly what the Sikh baptism meant. The Qurban, the Kanga, the Kishara, the case. So they said, if you want to join the British Army, you have to take the Amrit. Kamal di gal. England wale sanu kehne. Sanu to aap hi Amrit chakna chahiye. The British are telling the Sikhs, you have to take the Amrit. Because this is the reason. They knew, jine Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj da khande patte da Amrit chak liya, wo kade jang vich muh nahi morde. Translation: the British knew anybody who took the Amrit was so brave that they would never, ever, ever turn their backs in war. That's how fearless we were. So they demanded that you take Amrit. How amazing is that? Here's 6 soldiers marching with Guru Granth Sahib Ji, 1918. Right? Guru mere sang sada hai nade. The Guru was always with the Gursikhs. They always had Guru Granth Sahib Ji with them. And here they are. One Sikh is carrying Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. They piche apne Singh Chaur Sahib Ji seva kar rahe hain. Here's more information. 2.5 million Indian troops served in World War II. So now we're talking about World War II now. These are many of your ancestors. Go home and talk to your parents about anybody in your rishtedari or your relatives who was a military soldier. The greatest concentration of recruits into the British Army, the British Indian Army, came from Punjab. That's where most of the soldiers came from, Punjab. And so that's why they had to set the Dastadsi, they had to. Here's some other facts for you guys. Just some information at the Battle of Kohima, the Punjabi regiments numbered only 2,500. That's all. But they defeated a formidable Japanese force of 15,000. How unfair is that? 2,500 against 15,000. But they beat them, the Sikhs. It led to the end of Japan's control in northern Burma. Those are terrible odds. Frontline soldiers, the Guru Sikhs did all the work. They had the guns, they hand-to-hand battle. They would also carry messages to the front lines during war. And here they are on their cycles. Hindus and Sikhs as well. Triumphant Sikh admires a captured Nazi flag. So Hitler's finished, Nazi Germany, the war ends, and they're going through some of the rubble and they find these Nazi flags, and there's a Guru Sikh holding one up. Sikh soldiers of the 8th Army with local boys in Italy, World War II. Yeah, we fought, we flew planes, we drove the tanks. Guru Sikhs had huge responsibilities, and everywhere they went, people would literally in the streets just stop and just look at them with absolute admiration, because they haven't ever seen anything like this before. Right? Army's an army, but we have these unbelievable and they look so royal and so brave and so unique. They would literally, people would come running, they would call people, look, the Sikhs are coming here, look at these people, they look so beautiful, they're so royal, they're like kings, they're like princes. Like, we really stand out. Here's a quote from British General Frank Messervy. Finally, we that live on can never forget those comrades who in giving their lives gave so much that is good to the story of the Sikh regiment. No living glory can transcend that of their supreme sacrifice. May they rest in peace. But the officers and the European commanders who were in charge, they saw with their own eyes the incredible bravery of the Guru Sikhs. Here's some Victory Cross recipients, those Guru Sikhs who won the highest honor. Meg Gyan Singh, remarkable bravery at the Battle of Kohima, 1944. Lieutenant Karamjit Singh Judge eliminated 10 enemy bunkers and was killed in action while attacking a nest of 3 more. Do you believe that? All by himself. Avalinder Prakash Singh, supreme gallantry, that's bravery for rescuing stranded soldiers under intense fire. This is the stuff you see in movies. And Nanda Singh for single-handedly clearing and capturing 3 enemy trenches. All by himself. Here's the Prime Minister of Britain, Winston Churchill, and he's walking and he's greeting and shaking hands with Guru Sikhs, soldiers of World War II. And there's a picture of the Prime Minister. He's very, very famous, Winston Churchill. When you grow up, you'll read about him. This is what he said about the soldiers. Their sacrifice remains unsung, despite the fact that soldiers from South Asia outnumbered their British comrades in receiving the Victoria and George Cross medals, the highest awards for bravery. So Guru Sikhs, lowest in number in the army, and they win the most medals. Because you'd think you have a large population of soldiers, they should be getting the medals. But Sikhs were a small population, and they won most of the medals for bravery. Because they knew they will never turn their backs. That's the blessing of Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj. And that's Winston Churchill. The courage, character, and contributions of all soldiers from all countries in both world wars must never be forgotten. And those individuals deserve our ultimate respect. And if you think about it, boys and girls, one day out of the entire year, and from that one day, 2 minutes of silence, that's a pretty small price to pay. You know what price they paid for the freedom we enjoy now? They gave up their lives. We don't understand what it means to actually give up your life. It's the ultimate sacrifice. The Buddhists have been doing it for centuries. Here's some more pictures that you perhaps haven't seen before. Buddhists always praying for peace. Working on weapons in the factories. Hanging out with other officers. People could not get enough of the Sikh soldiers. Just the way they dressed and the way they looked. I mean, just look at them, right? You've got your helmet, and then you've got your dastar. Okay, I want to bring your attention to something most incredible. Until very recently, Sikhs were never ever known to be a part of the Canadian Army way back in the day. We always celebrate and we talk about the Sikhs that fought in World War I and World War II as a part of the British Army, Indian troops. But very recently, somebody has made an incredible discovery. It's Sikhs in the Canadian Army during World War I. Recently discovered. And his name is Private, and this is how they spelled his name. P-U-C-K-A-M Singh. पंजाबी में बाबा जी ना किस तरह हो सकता हुकुम सिंह हुकुम कितना हो सकता That's how it's spelled on his grave. That's how it's spelled in his military papers. That is how it is spelled in his medical papers, his death certificate. Discovering a Canadian hero, a Gursikh. Did you know Private Buckham Singh, first Sikh Canadian to be enlisted in the Canadian Army during World War I? He came to Canada from Punjab in 1907 when he was only 14 years old. He served with the 20th Canadian Infantry Battalion in the battlefields of Flanders, and you guys know the word Flanders very well because of that poem, Flanders Fields. What else about this amazing soldier? He was wounded twice in 2 battles, and his grave was actually discovered in Kitchener, Ontario. Now we know, according to Gurmat, when somebody passes away, we do saskar, right? We cremate the body, but way back then there was barely any Gursikhs in Canada, so his grave is still there in Ontario. And did you know there were a total of 10 Sikhs, some people say 8, who joined the Canadian Army to fight in the war, even though they weren't considered Canadians and didn't have many basic rights that other Canadians enjoyed. So I want you to understand this. Sikhs are in Canada over 100 years ago, getting ready to fight in the war. The Canadian government says you are not citizens. The Canadian government says you do not have the right to vote. The Canadian government says that all the rights that people have, you guys do not, because you're Sikh and you're from India. But guess what? These amazing guys still joined the army to fight on behalf of Canada. And did you know he received a victory medal? And if you look closely, it's got his initials there, B.A. Singh. 20th, can't read that. Here's another, this is the real medal. This is not something that, it's actually his real medal, his victory medal. And I'm going to show you a video clip that actually tells you more about this amazing Sikh soldier. Every day, every year, there's an annual Remembrance Day ceremony for Private Buckham Singh. And there's a little Gursikh bacha who went to Kitchener, Ontario, and is placing a Canadian flag by his grave. And here's a picture of the ceremony that happened, I believe, last year. And you can see all the people standing there. It happens every year. Like, how amazing is that? Because of this discovery, we are automatically, Sikhs are now connected to Canadian history in a way we have never been connected before. 10 Gursikhs, a part of the Canadian Army. There's an amazing documentary that was made last year, which I would love to share with you sometime, all about this. And now I'm going to show you a very short video clip about this individual, the first ever Gursikh in the Canadian Army during World War I. So be patient.
As November 11th approaches, remembrance ceremonies are already being held across the country. And after nearly a century since the start of the First World War, you probably wouldn't expect to hear about a new war hero. Ron Charles explains.
Of the many names of soldiers listed in the military section of this cemetery, one stands out. Private Bukam Singh, born in Mulipur, Punjab in India, fought for Canada in the First World War, forgotten for 90 years until this victory medal with his name on it turned up in an English pawn shop that Canadian historian Sandeep Singh Brar happened to visit.
I was amazed to see it also said 20th Canadian Infantry. I was like, wow, how can that be? There's no Sikhs in the Canadian Army at that time.
Brar knew only about the thousands of Sikh soldiers from India fighting for Britain in the Great War. There are plenty of photos of them, but not one of the handful of Sikh soldiers Brar learned had fought in Canadian regiments. He traced the name on the medal to the tombstone in Kitchener. People from the local Sikh community are awed by it.
I was really inspired to hear that Private Bukam Singh's gravesite was found here in Kitchener-Waterloo, literally in our backyard.
Brar's research didn't stop at this cemetery. He also discovered Singh came to Canada from Punjab as a 14-year-old in 1907. He signed up with the 20th Canadian Infantry in 1914. He was injured twice on the battlefields of France. He came home, and while recovering from his injuries in a Canadian military hospital, Singh died of tuberculosis in 1919. Now he is honored in a special ceremony every year around Remembrance Day.
We don't feel that you're now an outsider studying someone else's history. Now Canadian history becomes our history.
Now knowing the story of Bukam Singh and also seeing many other veterans from our community come together, it just makes Remembrance Day all that more inclusive and really reflects the diversity of Canada.
Giving the Sikh community a new connection to the event that so shaped Canada's history. Ron Charles, CBC News, Kitchener, Ontario.
Well, boys and girls, if anybody ever says to you, why do you do Remembrance Day? There's so many reasons that we do that are outlined and mentioned, but here's another reason. Because our ancestors, these Gursikhs, actually fought as a part of the Canadian Army. That's just amazing. I would love to one day take a group of students on a field trip to visit that site and others in Europe as well. Here's a slide I showed you before, Remembrance Day. We honor those who have given their lives serving Canadians and helping people of other nations. And we all know why we remember. It's so important. How can you forget?
Puja kiche naam dhyaye bin naame puj na hoye bin naam